Welcome to Spark, a leadership series hosted by the Office of Student Life's Buckeye Leadership Fellows Program, where we connect with university and community leaders as well as university alumni to hear more about their stories, principles, and knowledge for the next generation of Buckeyes. Join us as we explore leadership lessons and advice for the future. All right, thank you for joining us again. We have another special guest with us to join us for our Spark Conversations. Really excited to have this guest because they are joining us from the city that never sleeps and coming to us with a ton of really great, unique experiences that I think would be really valuable for our Buckeye community. So this individual is an alum of Ohio State University, class of 2010. A DEI expert. I don't know if you want me to call you that, but I'm going to. An HR professional. Please help us join us in welcoming Devin Graham. Devin, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for that intro. It's amazing.
We try to keep it splashy as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But one of the things we want to do at the very beginning is to give our audience an opportunity to know what you're doing right now. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself. Where are you right now professionally? Any exciting or new fun things happening in your life?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So thanks for having me. Happy to be here. I was honored to be asked. So currently in terms of work, I'm at Google. I have been at Google for 3.5 years, and I'm currently leading diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for cloud recruiting. So what that really means is that I empower and equip our recruiting team to, one, make sure we're hiring the best talent for Google with an inclusive lens, but also that I kind of interrogate and question the systems that we've had in place for decades. So Google is not, has not been around forever, but I think it's like a 22, 23-year-old company. But the way that we hire has kind of stayed the same throughout. So those are types of things that I look at and make sure that we're not disadvantaging anybody in the process at any point in time. So that's my role. In terms of New York, I've been in New York for 7.5 years, which is shocking to say the least. I actually did not think I would be here this long. When I left Columbus and moved here, I thought I'd be here for like a year or two. So that's like really surprising, to be honest. And then personally, I love traveling. So I recently got back from Tulum, which I loved. And yeah, I'm looking forward to traveling more soon.
So I have questions about your travel, but we're going to save that to the end. So we are excited to hear about the things that you're doing all over the world. But we're not going to get to the global piece just yet. We're going to take it all the way back to your roots. And one of the things that we love to do is talk about hometowns and where people are from. So where are you from? And if you think about the evolution of life, career, your growth, where you're from, what has that meant to you in your overall experience?
Yeah. So yeah, it's such a good question. Usually you get asked where you're from, but you don't get asked all of the other stuff on the back end. So I'm glad you asked it that way. So I'm originally from Richmond Heights, Ohio. It's a small town on the east side of Cleveland. There was, just to give you a sense, there was one elementary school, one middle school, one high school. The middle school was connected to the high school. Everybody knew each other. Everybody knew everyone. And although Cleveland is a large city, Richmond Heights was small. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. And I was a high achiever, honestly, in high school. I was the first Black valedictorian at my high school. And I will come around later to why I think that that's relevant, because I'm not one of those people that like brags about it still to this day, like years later. But that was kind of indicative of how I felt at the time. I felt like I was hitting a peak. Like it was high school, and I thought like that was, the best time of my life. Like at the time, I thought that. And then when we start to talk about Ohio State a little bit later, I can tell you why. Just like I'm like kind of setting it up that way, but that's where I'm from. I had an amazing upbringing, was exposed to a lot early on, and my parents were so supportive of me, like going to Ohio State and my goals and my path and all of that. So, in terms of hometown, I feel like I was really lucky, to be honest.
Nice. We love to hear that. It's always really important to think about where you've been on the path to where you're going. So that's one of the things we always try to get a sense of when we're chatting with university alum, because Ohio State is such a large place and has such a large alumni base, and it's coming from all over the world. So it's always really intriguing to hear about where people are from. So big fish, small pond, and then you
Yes.
hop over to a very
Yeah.
big pond.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about your Ohio State experience and what was it like? What were some of the things that you did while you were here? What were some meaningful moments, experiences, people? You can kind of run the gamut, whatever that may be.
Yeah. I like still remember when my parents dropped me off and I was like on South Campus, living in Patterson and just like walking around South Campus, going to convocation, going to the student involvement fair. My first year concert, I don't know if they still do these, but my first year concert was Rihanna, which now is crazy to think about. So it was amazing. Honestly, it was the best experience ever in terms of exposure and everything. And I think my first year, honestly, I went a little too hard in terms of getting involved and like being in all of these groups and not even realizing like, oh, I need to go to class. Oh, I need to study. Oh, I need to focus on this. So like I think over time I like figured out the right balance for me. But when you're in high school, you have the structures of like your parents and homework and teachers who are like assigning you things. In college, you have a lot more freedom. And so I think that that was an interesting transition for me and one that I needed to go through. And so I'm actually happy that I went to Ohio State because I do think it prepared me for moving to New York and things like that. Like my world has just kind of gotten bigger over time. So I'm appreciative of that. But in terms of how I spent my time at Ohio State, the first year or two was really focused on being involved with first year experience. So the Office of Admissions and a lot of the programs that happened through there. I was a part of the Leadership Collaborative, which I know doesn't exist anymore, but it was a really cool conference that I went to prior to being a freshman at Ohio State. And then something I was involved with in general over my time. I also was a university host, which basically meant that I spent time talking to prospective students and their parents before they went on their tours. I did the same thing for athletic hosting. So talking to football players from high school and like their parents about what it actually meant to be a student. So I spent a lot of my time there just making sure that I was paying it forward, welcoming students to campus in whatever way that I could, because that was really what drove me to accept at Ohio State versus other schools that I had been in that I had gotten, what do they even call it? Acceptances at? I don't even know. I've been so out of the game for a long time, but that's basically what pushed Ohio State over the edge for me. Um, After my sophomore year, I actually crossed AKA, so Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, my sophomore year. So that really carried me through to senior year. And that was a huge part of my college career, especially in terms of working with a lot of different women that have different styles than you, learning how to work through conflict, learning how to support and uplift each other, learning how to take something that has a really strong and rich legacy, especially in the Black community, and honoring that and honoring the people who came before us. So I think that it's it kind of really dovetailed into what Ohio State is in terms of being rich in tradition and all of that. So I had an amazing college experience because I feel like I was able to find my tribe and find my people that I identified with.
That is
Which is
amazing. You have sisterhood, you have
yes.
paying it forward, community engagement, all the things. I'm gonna throw a little wrench in our plan here.
Yes,
Um, because I
please.
also want to know, and I know you talked a little bit about your role at Google at the intro and some of the work that you're doing and why that work is important. I kind of want to know what led you to deciding that human resources was a career path that you wanted to take on.
Oh my gosh. This is such a good question because I kind of I kind of stumbled upon it, to be honest. So when I was applying to Ohio State, I was an architecture major, even though I like don't know why, but I was an architecture major. I just was convinced that I wanted to do something artistic and all of this stuff. I'm still obsessed with architecture, but I'm glad that it wasn't my career for me because I don't have that skill set. um, and then when I got to Ohio State, I was a pharmacy major. So I was like, okay, like I could do this, like medical. I was good in science in high school. I don't know if they're still doing the organic chemistry thing track in college. I'm sure they are, but that was very difficult for me. So like I was like, maybe this is my passion because like this isn't working for me. So I changed my major to business and I was business accounting because my uncle was an accountant, which is not a good reason to pick a major. And I did an accounting internship through En-ROADS at PricewaterhouseCoopers, so at PwC. And I loved PwC, had the best mentors, but the work itself wasn't compelling to me. But I noticed my campus recruiter who, I loved her. Like everything she was doing to build community, which is a huge part of what drives me and what is so important to me, was attracted to me. So honestly, after that internship, I changed my major to HR. And I'm really happy that I did because it is my passion. Like I love it. And you can do so many things in HR, which I don't think a lot of people know. So that's kind of what got me there. But it was a little bit of a windy path, if I'm gonna be honest.
I love that. I love hearing those stories. So, I mean, this series is called Spark.
Yeah.
We always talk about how do we find spark in people? What does that spark look like in people? And sometimes, there's those individuals that create that spark for you in terms of the path that you're going to walk down. I work in higher education because of my undergraduate experience as well, and things and people, things I got to do with people I was able to meet and build relationships with. So it's really great to hear that you had all these different opportunities and ideas about what you thought you were going to do, and it took engagement with one person who really created a great experience for you and painted a really good picture and vision of the work that you could do. So that's really exciting. I'm going to piggyback off of some of the things that you said, because I think one of the things with students when they come to Ohio State or they start college, they're trying to discover what that meaningful path would be, what's going to be meaningful work. And sometimes it's challenging to really know inherently what that will be. So in terms of, you talked about switching majors and understanding what some of the challenges were that came with that. So thinking, I think, broadly about challenges or obstacles that you face, what, if any, that you'd like to share have been challenges that you faced? And it could be while you were in college, it can be during your career. And what are some good lessons that you've learned from overcoming some of those challenges?
Yeah, I love this question because I think that we don't talk about this enough, just in general. We don't talk about our failures. We don't talk about roadblocks. And the reason I brought up that I was like very high achieving in high school and valedictorian and all that stuff is because when I got to Ohio State, I was dealing with imposter syndrome heavily. I struggled because I didn't realize, I don't think I knew when I got to Ohio State that everybody was going to be like that. Everybody's going to be smart. Everybody would have been president of whatever, started their own business. At this point, TikTok, like it could be anything, you know? And that really like kind of messed with me mentally because I was like, okay, well, if all of these people are amazing, maybe I'm not. But I think I needed to learn that lesson in college that just because somebody else is amazing doesn't mean that you're not, or just because they're in the room too doesn't mean that I can't be. And that is something that's carried through, and I'm glad that I dealt with it in college, and thank God for my mother because she honestly is the one that got me through college. She would come down every time I needed to change my major. She would come down, we would go to dinner, we would figure it out, pump it out. But moving to New York, same thing. Working at JP Morgan, same thing. Working at Google, same thing. You're only going to, if you're doing life right, you're only going to accelerate into these spaces where people are better than you, or say like, and that's a good thing because that's how you get to be better. And so I think like in college, I saw it as a threat almost, like because you're in high school, you're ranked against each other. Like there's a curve, like there's this undercurrent of competition in high school that I think if you can get your mind around in college that it doesn't need to be like that, you will be better off in the long run because these people aren't your competition. They're there to help you level up to where you're supposed to be. And so I think what I saw as a roadblock in college has actually been my best lesson in life, that like you need to like support yourself, look out for yourself, but also support the people around you and help lift the people up around you. It's not a competition. It doesn't need to be a competition.
I mean, you definitely just tapped into like a soapbox moment that I have all the time when I'm explaining what the transition is like developmentally for students when they're coming in from high school to college, and how that transition definitely shifts from, and we can talk about this all day, but I'm not going to go down there, but down that path. But you definitely tapped into a soapbox moment for me, but I think it is really important for students to understand that they're not alone when they're feeling when they're feeling that imposter syndrome, that there's a lot of people, we get this in our program all the time, like all these great students, right? And they're so much better than me. And how can I measure up? And I think that reframing that, not so much as how can I measure up to you, but how are you going to help like level up, like help me level up, I think is a really good way to frame the experience. And we hope, we hope that this reaches as many Buckeyes as possible so that they fully understand like what their time at Ohio State should be spent focusing on, not so much of how can I be better than someone else, and more so how can other people help me be better? How can I help other people be better as well? So you talked about your mom.
Yeah.
You talked about your parents. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about your heroes. So individuals, people you've had in your life who've served as mentors, and any good pieces of advice that they've given you that have really like stayed with you. And then if you like as well, you are definitely working in the space. And I know we just had offline here a conversation about how you've coached and supported some of our students. If you want to also talk about how you mentor people as well, that would be great.
Yeah, happy to. So, yeah, my parents are a huge source of inspiration for me. So, for the first 6 years of my life, it was just me and my mom. She was a single mom. She was she was a teacher, and then she was a principal, and then she ended up like leading, working in Cleveland public schools, and she has been one of the pioneers for social and emotional learning, which is why I talk so much about mental health and making sure like you're good and like putting on your own oxygen mask before you can help anybody else, because I think that that's super critical and something she taught me. But after like her and my stepdad got married, like he became one of my heroes too, because honestly, just the way he showed up in my life, and you hear all of these stories about fathers, and I don't think that fathers really get the credit that they deserve sometimes, because both of them together like have taught me so many things. And last year, while we were in the height of the pandemic, I left New York and I went back to Richmond Heights, and I was there for 2.5 months staying with them. I thought it was gonna be 3 weeks. I only packed for 3 weeks. I ended up being there for months. And it was just because everything that happened with George Floyd, and like, honestly, I didn't want to be anywhere else but with my parents. And I think that they provide so much perspective on life because of what they've experienced in life that just like drives me. It makes me want to achieve more, because I think that what I've already done so far is bigger than they ever would have thought that it could have been. And I don't even feel like I've done that many things. So they're a huge source of inspiration for me. I also I have a really good group of girlfriends. Like and AKA is a part of that, but I think that just like the people I have around me, I've been able to like really, really learn a lot from them, whether they are younger than me, my same age, older than me. You can learn something from everybody. And so my best friend Bobby, who I met at Ohio State, so I'll shout her out here, inspires me so much and has taught me so much. And I'm lucky to have like her and other girlfriends just throughout my like life that are inspiring to me. And then from a work perspective, I actually think that I've been able to learn something from every single manager I've had, whether their style was my style or not. And I think that when you kind of don't put enough pressure on your manager or the people that you're working with to provide you with everything that you feel like you need, it kind of frees you up to take the best of them and kind of move throughout the rest of your career. So I've definitely had people like that in my life too.
That is awesome to hear. We try to tell our students all the time that you can learn something from every situation, every person that you engage with, even if you don't think, what they're interested in and what they're doing directly aligns with, what you want to do. And so I think that's very powerful to say, we're very different, but there's things that I can learn from you and I can apply to my own experience. So I think that's great. You talked a little bit earlier about building community. And I think a lot of times when we have conversations with university alum and university and community leaders, we're so like zeroed in on your career development, which is great because this is the phase that we're in higher education, right? We're looking at, what are we learning and how is that going to apply to the next steps in our lives? But sometimes we don't always ask, like, once you've transitioned from your collegiate experience to real life,
Yeah.
How do you then take all those principles, all those things that you've learned about engaging with your community? How do you take that with you and apply it? And I know that you are currently sitting on two different boards right now. And so I want to ask you a little bit more about how you've been engaging within your community, and how have you continued to make sure that that was like a major component of what your experience looks like post OSU?
Yeah. I am on two boards right now, and I can talk a little bit about them. I think for me, I've always wanted to pay it forward. It took me a while to, like, after I graduated, to get in a place where I felt good enough to, and by good enough, I just mean like settled, honestly, to spend my time on the community. That's something I've always wanted to do, but honestly, moving to New York is a lot. Like, I was working a ton, so now I'm in a place where everything feels like settled. The dust is settled, and I can, like, spend my time doing that. And so the first board that I'm on is the Anti-Violence Project, and basically, it's an organization that makes sure that LGBTQ folks, HIV affected folks, don't have violence that impacts them in any real way. And if they are in danger, there's a hotline as a part of AVP that they can call that will come in and advocate for them, come in and do whatever they need to do in New York City. And that's so important to me, only because when you look at the amount of violence that that community faces and has faced over time, they need avenues that are safe for them, that they can trust, that they can go to. And AVP is that in New York. And so it's a board that actually my friend was on. I'm super passionate about it, and um, I'm like newer to the board, but in general, it's been a really, really great experience. And then the other board is Create for Education. And so I talked a little bit earlier about social emotional learning and how my mom was involved in that. So this board is associated with that and making sure that teachers and professionals kind of get all of the tools that they need to be successful in their roles. I think a lot of times we talk about students and how they need to be successful, but the people who are also leading and teaching also need that. So that's what that organization is about. I'm still involved with AKA. I'm in an alumni chapter here as well. And anytime I can give time through Google or volunteer, I do. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but anytime I can mentor an Ohio State student, somebody who's in HR, somebody who's interested in getting into diversity, equity, and inclusion, I will, because I think that those are places where you need support and the community is small. So you kind of need each other.
All really great work. And I would like to stress too, talking about your role with Create Education. Like, I
Yeah.
think we've learned over the course of the last year and a half just
Mm-hmm.
how important educators and teachers are. And I think, I'm getting
Right.
my doctorate in education, and it's something that we explore often. And I think it was just very much so just put on this platform during the last 18 months or so, or just like, what is it like to be an educator? What does the educational system look like, and the challenges that people face, and the value that we place on educators and educational institutions as a whole. So I think that that's really, really great work. It's, in education, it's not just the students.
I
So,
think you, like, seeing the strain that the pandemic had, I mean, to your point, on educators really illuminated for me, like, wow, they really need support.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I have educators in my family, mentors that are educators. And, I obviously, being in education, know what the value is and the importance is. And so it's really, really great to see other people finally like paying attention. Um, Unfortunate circumstances, but it's good to see that it's something that I think will definitely be in consideration for people as they move forward in policy and voting and how they fund things and philanthropy. So we shall definitely see
Yeah.
how it all pans out. So we talked a little bit earlier as we kind of get closer to wrapping up here, about the things that you like to do in life. You talked about traveling. So not that this needs to be your answer, but it can definitely be something that you share with us. What's
Yeah.
next for you as you kind of move forward, career and life and travel?
Yeah.
What's next for you on your journey?
Yeah. Um, so interesting. I think it's so funny when you're in college, you kind of like have this like mark in time, this thing you want to do. Like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be in HR, I want to be a campus recruiter, whatever. You would be like surprised at how quickly you can reach one of those milestones. Like you kind of like look up and you're like, okay, it's been 7 years, I've done that. And so that's happened to me where I made a goal for myself and I realized like, I need to make another goal for myself. So I don't plan too far ahead. I plan like 2 to 3 years out maybe. And even then they're kind of like loose goals because I feel like life kind of takes you in a lot of different directions. So from a career standpoint, I don't know. And I think that's okay. Honestly, I feel like I've been guided to the role that I have now, and I'm so invested in getting this right for Google, for myself, for Black and Brown people, for people with disability, like for LGBT, like for everyone. And so I'm solving for everyone in my new role, and that's something that I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do at a company like Google. So I haven't planned that far ahead, but I think that I will figure it out along the way. From a personal perspective, I always like am wondering like, am I gonna leave New York? Am I gonna stay here? I like love it here. So I think like I'm probably here. I'm probably in New York at this point. I'm probably a Brooklynite for a while. In terms of travel though, I'm trying to go everywhere. Now that the pandemic is over, I want to go to Italy. I've never been there. I want to go back to London and Paris. I'm obsessed with both of those places. I'm going to Mexico City in a month or so for my friend's birthday. We're doing a Texas tour soon. So we're doing a lot of travel. So I'm really into that. And then also later this year, I'm starting like wine education courses. So honestly, like learning how to identify wines from different places, like getting a certification in it, and something that I'm super interested in. If you're 21, you're not. Hold off.
Disclaimer, if you're 21.
Yeah, if you're 21. But yeah, just trying to, continue learning along the way.
That's awesome. I aspire to all of those things. So I think that is absolutely fantastic. So Devin, before we let you go, because I'm sure you have a lot of things that you need to do out in New York, especially for Google. But I always like to ask people to give us one recommendation
Yeah.
about things that you think that we should engage with as a Buckeye community. So it could be a book, it could be music, it could be a podcast, it could be a specific experience, but based on the things that you think are valuable, what would you recommend?
Oh my gosh, I think this is actually the hardest question. I'm trying to think. Oh my God, a Buckeye community? That's like so much pressure.
And you know what? Let's take the pressure off. Just think about the things that you fully enjoy. And if
Yeah.
something that you're really passionate about that you would want to share with other people that you really think people should try or experience themselves.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I think that I think it's a couple. I think it's a few different things. In terms of like podcast, I love The Read, which I don't know if a lot of people listen to, but it's like a pop culture podcast that's these two people, they live in New York, and it's just in terms of culture and what's going on in society, I just think it's honestly hilarious and I love listening to it. And back in the day, their show used to be like 45 minutes and now it's like 2 hours sometimes. It's just like them just like talking about everything. um I'm a huge podcast person in general. I also love Brene Brown's podcast, but I feel like that's a little too like she like HR folk, like better yourself focused. Aside from that, I just always encourage people to like be like always be learning something different or experiencing a different culture. So one thing that I kind of regret not doing in college is studying abroad, just because I really never looked into it. But I wish I would have started then because I think it's like a really easy way to put yourself in a completely different environment in a really safe way. And that's probably like the only thing I'd recommend that to students. But yeah, from a culture perspective, I think the Read podcast, and I'm a huge fan of TikTok. Huge fan of TikTok. I'm all over TikTok.
I did hear you say like the students are TikTok famous these days.
They are.
They
It's
definitely
impressive. I mean, we barely had Twitter in college when I was in college.
are.
When we had it, it was a little bit like, okay, like what are we even talking about?
Yes.
You know?
I definitely understand that. Yes.
I know. Completely different
Awesome.
world. I know.
All right. So, final thoughts here. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to our Buckeyes, what would it be?
Yeah. I would say don't stop investing in yourself ever. And the reason I say that is because college is an investment. Like that's an investment in yourself and your future. But after college, those guardrails of support are not there. So it's really up to you to carry on your lifestyle in whatever way you want, whether that's learning a new language or learning like an instrument or a sport or like these one classes that I'm taking. You should never ever let that stop, let the learning stop, because the moment that you do that, you kind of get to a point where you might like reach a ceiling, or like you wake up one day and you're like, oh my God, what are all my hobbies? I feel like I used to do all this cool stuff. I think that that's the one thing that as I've gotten older, I want to make sure I maintain for myself. Because that self-investment and just protecting your mental energy and your space and your time is just going to be ever increasingly important because it's on you to maintain. So I think that that's one thing. And then the second thing, if I can give you two, is don't ever think that you're gonna have it all figured out. That doesn't actually ever happen. I think that you think that I thought that it would. I thought I would get to this age, whatever age that was in the back of my head, where everything would have been like figured out. That doesn't actually happen, and I think that that's okay. Do you know what I mean? Like you're not supposed to. I think things change so much within yourself and then in society, and you need to adapt with it and move with it and identify how you're going to show up in those moments. And I think that that's really cool. So it would be those two things, I think.
So powerful. Things that I think not only current students take into consideration, but our alumni as well. Specifically young alumni as they're striving for those goals, reaching those benchmarks that they've set for themselves, knowing that there's, we change the goalposts, right? So I think that that's really, really powerful stuff, really, really important things for people to take into consideration as they move forward in career and life with whatever goals that they've set for themselves. So thank you so much, Devin, for spending some time with us this morning to chat about your experiences, your time at Ohio State, how everything holistically has kind of come together, and how you're moving forward, both in your career professionally, but in life as well. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us from the Big Apple this early in the morning and letting us disrupt your day just a little bit.
Of course, I'm happy to do it.
We really appreciate it. Well, as usual, until next time with another great Buckeye alum, we shall see you again. Everyone.